listening is not about hearing the words that are spoken. It's not being able to parrot back what somebody said to you. Listening is listening for meaning. You are a good listener. The test for being a good listener is if the other person feels heard. Right?
Say that again.
Right?
Write that down. Can I tell you a little bit about our people?
Please.
Real estate people, of course, but I have to tell you that you're in the presence of truly servant leaders. And what I mean by that is they work every day to, help create a greater good, which I know you believe in for everybody. Truly servant leaders that go out every day and work on behalf of others. I'm very proud of them. I'm very proud of several things, Simon. Number one, our leadership, who during COVID truly led with calm. And, took us where we needed to be. We huddled, we called a huddle, and these people came. And they came again and again and again. And because of the huddle we called and because of what we were able to do, we really gave them the charge to go into the community and be a resource and not a sales pitch. And we did that a lot of different ways. We did that through helping to refuel the food banks and how to look at diversity from a different eye, and how to really go in and strengthen each community that they could and just build a better life for people. And the result of that has been tremendous growth in our company. So I wanted the opportunity to tell you that. We don't get the recognition we should typically as an industry. We tend to be commission breath sometimes, and that's not who we are. We're an entirely different company. So we welcome you, and we're glad to have you here with us today. So talk to us a little bit about the fun things that might be coming. We know change is coming in our industry. We've had a really good ride for a while. You talk about the infinite game. If you will, first explain the difference in infinite and finite game.
Yeah, sure. I'm obsessed with this idea. In the mid-1980s, a philosopher and theologian by the name of James Carse defined these two kinds of games, finite games and infinite games. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed-upon objective. Football, baseball. There's always a beginning, middle, and an end. And if there's a winner, then necessarily there has to be a loser. Then you have infinite games. Infinite games are defined as known and unknown players, which means anyone can join the game at any time, and you don't necessarily know who all the other players are. Mm-hmm. The rules are changeable, which means every player can play however they want. And the objective is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. Turns out we are players in infinite games every day of our lives, whether we know it or not. There's no such thing as winning healthcare, right? There's no such thing as winning education. You can come in first for the finite amount of time you're at school, where we agree upon the time frame and the metrics, grades, but nobody wins education or nobody wins learning. You can't be number one in your marriage. You can be number two, but you can't be number one.
Well, maybe the first time, but...
Exactly. But then it's finite, and you have to try again. Exactly. The goal is to perpetuate, remember? And there's definitely no such thing as winning business. But if you listen to the language of so many people, it becomes abundantly clear they don't actually know the game they're playing in. I hear people all the time in business talk about, we're number one, or I'm the best, or I want to beat my competition. Based on what? Based on what agreed upon metrics, objectives, or timeframes. And this is a problem, because when we play with a finite mindset in an infinite game, when we play to win in a game that has no finish line, then there are some consistent and predictable outcomes. The big ones are the decline of trust, the decline of cooperation, and the decline of innovation. And if you think about it, everything that I just described, like you don't know who all the other agents are, anybody can become an agent at any time they want, anybody can run their business however they want, and nobody wins. You can, selling a property is finite. There's a beginning, middle, and end.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you about. Okay.
But then it just repeats and repeats. And a series of repeating finite games doesn't make an infinite game. It just makes you exhausted.
Okay. So we are finite in ways because we have rules, we have guidelines, we have all of that.
The transactions are finite.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And people come and go and enter and not.
I'll give you a personal example.
I want that.
That shows you the difference.
Do I want that? That's the question.
The good news is the person who sold me this property, it was the seller's agent.
Oh, okay.
Right? He was charming and nice and wonderful and lovely and helpful and all the things that I would expect. And I warmed up to him, and he was apparently helping me. And then I remember distinctly at the closing, he sat there with no personality. All of his charm had left. All of his friendliness had gone. He barely engaged with me. He just wanted to be there to collect his check so he could get out of there. And I realized it was all fake. It was all for show. It was all to butter me up so that I would simply sign on the dotted line. And as a result, I will never work with him again as a buyer or a seller. I'll never list with him ever. And I probably will never work with that company again because I realized they just saw me as a number. They never saw me as a person in the first place. He was an old white guy. I mean, that should tell you a little bit of something as well. That's sort of maybe how he was raised in the industry. And by the way, the mortgage broker was no different. You know, he was charming and wonderful and lovely and helped me get a great rate, et cetera, et cetera. And then I remember after I closed, he called me and said, "Congratulations." And I said, "Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you." And he called me just to congratulate me on closing on my house. And then the first thing he said to me was, "And if you know anybody who's looking for a mortgage, I'd really appreciate the recommendation." He never called me to congratulate me. He called me because he wanted the referral. Like, give it a breath. You know, like, call me and congratulate me, and a week later ask me for the referral.
And see, let me tell you what sucks about that. Can I say that? What sucks about that totally is that one person colored your entire opinion.
But this is finite versus infinite.
Okay.
He could only see the transaction. He could only see get business, get more business. Get business, get more business. What he didn't understand is he's dealing with a human being, and the more that there's a relationship, I will gladly recommend him. I will gladly introduce you to my guy, right? Now I'm completely agnostic because if you're going to treat me like a transaction, I'm going to treat you like a transaction. If you're going to treat me like a transaction, I'm going to squeeze you to get more money out of you. I want a lower rate. I'm going to squeeze the agents. But if you treat me like a human being, I'll gladly pay a higher rate because I want to work with you. And that's what infinite-minded players understand better, which is you don't have to be the cheapest. You don't have to have the lowest rate or the lowest price if you have a great relationship.
And you know, thank you for saying that. And that really is, we're the unbrokerage. You know, we're a little bit untraditional. I just applaud you saying that. So let's turn that just a little bit, because I do think the old mindset of real estate is commission breath. It's next. I'm going to say whatever I need to say, do whatever I need to do to get you on the hook for the next time.
Right.
What if we looked at it from a consultant perspective? What if we said what the consumer needs now? Because the consumer, they've got all the stuff. They can go online and look at it. Sure. They can do a virtual tour. They can go over.
You can't be an expert in what prices, what things are worth anymore.
But yet they need a navigator.
Right.
Now more than ever, the consumer needs a navigator.
Yep.
So should we approach it from a consultant or maybe even a coaching perspective?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is yes.
How?
So let's think about what a coach or a consultant, let's not use the word consultant. It's a dirty word in a lot of industries. No, I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just that that word has baggage.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
My Tar Heels are in the final game tonight, so let's talk about coaching.
So here's what I like about the term coach more than consultant, right? A consultant, by the nature of the definition, I'm the expert. I'm the consultant, right? Okay. A coach recognizes that you have value. So the best athletes in the world have coaches. Mm-hmm. And by the way, they're better than their coaches at playing the game. But the coaches have a perspective that they don't have. And so I'm a huge fan of the idea of coaching. And when you say, let me be your coach, doesn't diminish your education. In fact, you may have bought and sold more houses than I've bought and sold. You may know more than me, especially if you're young in this industry and you're selling to somebody this is not their first rodeo, right? But to be a coach means I'm going to guide, I'm going to do some of the heavy lifting for you, and you will change your style to meet the style of the person you're with. If they know a lot, you can speak to them in a different way.
Please write that down. The definition of a coach, if we go back, right? A coach was to provide safe passage, right? The coach would take you from point A and deliver you safely at point B.
Right.
That's what we do. We find your home, successful closing.
Yep. And I think one of the essential skills of being a good coach is listening. And this is a skill that is not taught in school. We don't learn it on home, unfortunately, and we don't learn it at work. Listening is not hearing the words that are spoken.
That's like my favorite quote that you say. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Listening is, I thought I was being original. The listening is not about hearing the words that are spoken. It's not being able to parrot back what somebody said to you. Listening is listening for meaning, right? You are a good listener. The test for being a good listener is if the other person feels heard, right?
Say that again.
Right?
Write that down.
So I mean, we've all had, we just take it out of the context of business, right? We've all had an argument or wanted to share our feelings with a friend or a loved one, right? Spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend. You're sitting on the couch and you say, something's bugging you, and you say, can I just tell you something that's bugging me? And they respond by trying to fix it. Or they respond by pointing out the facts that may or may not align with how you feel, right? Well, that's impossible because this is what happened. And what they're missing is you're not looking for them to compare the facts of what's being said. You just want to feel heard. You just want somebody to go, oh my God, that's really hard. Yeah, I hear it. I hear that. Thank you for sharing that with me. That must be difficult. Thank you, that's all I needed, right? I'll give you a very funny example of bad listening. So I used to date a girl who's an air traffic controller. Air traffic controllers are a breed unto themselves, and it's only about the facts. And I woke up one morning, I had something in my eye, and I couldn't open my eye, it was hurting, and I'm like flushing it out with water, and nothing's working, and I couldn't even open my eye, and I have her come, I'm like, come here. I'm like, look in my eye, do you see anything? Do you see anything? And she looks in, she goes like this, and she goes, there's nothing there, and then walks away. And I eventually, whatever it was, I eventually was okay, and I went up to her, I was like, WTF, right? I'm like, I had something in my eye, you just walked away. And she's like, there was nothing there, so what do you want me to do? I was like, a little sympathy? She's like, well, that's not going to get anything out of your eye. Listening is standing by my side while I'm flushing it out with water and go, oh my God, that must hurt so much. Yeah, it does, thank you, right? That's listening. And if somebody can learn to listen, and now this is where it gets actionable. This is not me just waxing philosophical and telling funny stories about listening. My friend Will Guidera, how many of you are restaurant people? Have you ever heard of 11 Madison Park? So at some point in New York City, 11 Madison Park was the best restaurant in the world, right? Ranked number one. And Will believes in this, he was the former owner, he believes in this concept of unreasonable hospitality, which is going to what good service is and then going way, way, way beyond. And one of the core tenets of unreasonable hospitality is learning to listen. And I'll give you an example that directly impacts your business. Most agents don't listen. And I'll give you an example. What do you do for your clients after they close on a home, right? It's very common. We've all bought a home too, right? Which is you walk into this new home that you just bought as a buyer, and there's a bottle of champagne in the fridge. There's a basket of flowers on the dining room table. The same basket of flowers that you gave to every other client, the same bottle of champagne that you gave to every client. Generic. I'm a number. It's just rote. But if you were listening, while they were looking at all those homes, and they saw this one little room that was too small to make a bedroom, it was just sort of a stupid little nook that nobody really understood why that room existed in the house, and your client walked in and goes, oh, I could make this my yoga room, and that's the house they bought. Instead of putting a bottle of champagne in the house, this is what Will talks about, instead of putting a bottle of champagne in the fridge, why not put a yoga mat in that room with a little note that says, it's perfect, right? That's called listening. And every single time you go out with clients, they are telling you things. They're telling you stories. They're waxing philosophical. They're telling you what they don't like and what they do like. But the problem is you're listening to whether they like big windows. You're listening to whether they like the view. You're listening to whether they have 2 cars and they need 3 cars or whatever it is. But you're not listening to the reasons why.
The why.
You're not listening for the meaning. And those are the little notes you want to make that make someone feel seen and make someone feel heard.
And what will that do for the referrals?
I mean, you get skyrocket. You get skyrockets because you're no longer feeling like a number, you're feeling like a person.
So we came through, our industry basically came through the pandemic pretty well, right? I mean, we've been on an upward swing. How many in here believe change is coming? A shift happens, right? How do you feel about that? Frightened? I heard even a very seasoned professional say scared. So how do we deal with that?
So one of the things that I loved when COVID first showed up was every talking head talked about during these uncertain times. And I wanted to raise my hand and be like, all times are uncertain. Mm-hmm. There's never been a time ever that was certain. All that happened was something that we didn't expect happened that reminded us that time is uncertain. And periods of consistency just breed laziness, is all they do. When economies are skyrocketing, you can afford to be lazy.
People get bad habits.
Yeah, you can actually afford to be lazy when there's no inventory and prices are sky high and all you have to do is show somebody one house and they'll buy it tomorrow. Like, you're not a genius. It's not you, right? It's like somebody should have leaned over and told Peloton, you're not better, you're lucky.
Right.
Right place, right time. And the smart ones know that. Mm-hmm. The smart ones don't take above average success. I'll give you the analogy. So I know this guy who he trades stocks, right? And when the stock market, when he makes money, it's because he's a genius. When he loses money, it's because of market conditions, right? Now, you can't have it both ways. You can't mix your logics. You're either a genius or an idiot, or it's good market conditions or bad market conditions, but you can't mix them, right? And the best people, the ones with the infinite mindset, understand that. They understand, they don't celebrate the good too much because they understand that it can change tomorrow, and they don't mourn the bad too much because they know it could change tomorrow. And it's about saving money and being humble in the good times so that you have money and remain confident in the bad times. It's that wonderful balance of humility and confidence that go together. But people who make tons of money and spend it all in the good times have none in the bad times. And the best organizations, the best salespeople, the best solopreneurs I know, they're conservative in the good times and they're liberal in the hard times.
It's so funny because that's the calmness that we were led by. We were led by that exact mindset when the pandemic first started. So the uncertainty, the just planning, just knowing. Let's pull that back to coaching. How do we take that out? How do we coach to that? How are we coached to that?
So the single best way to deal with any kind of difficulty, personal struggle, business struggle, financial struggle, whatever it is with others. Like, no human being is strong enough or smart enough to do this thing called life or career alone. We're just not that strong. But together, mm-hmm. we're remarkable, right? And so, here we are talking about relationships and listening as it relates to buyers and sellers, but the reality is your ability to learn to listen, to deal with difficult conversations, to how to give and receive feedback, how to resolve conflict, that's actually as if not more important with the people you work with. The value of this event, by the way, is not folks like me on the stage. This is just the fun bits. The value are the people you're sitting next to, the relationships you build. Like, during the breaks, that's the important stuff. During the breaks, don't disappear just to be on your phone. Right? Because if you have a team back home and you got to check all your email, nothing undermines trust in your team more than you feeling like you have to respond to every single email that you're getting. Just tell them you're going away to this event, deal with everything, right? They're smart enough, build them up. But putting that aside, get to know the people here, because when bad things happen, the single best resources you have is each other. Right. You can pick up the phone and say, I'm struggling. And it's doing it with each other. I've had the big honor, the huge honor of getting to work with some of our folks in uniform, and not a single one of them runs into battle for God or country. Zero. it's always person to the left and person to the right. And their courage doesn't come from some deep internal fortitude. It comes from their desire to protect the person next to them and the fear of letting them down. The fear of letting them down is worse than the fear of doing something difficult, right? There was a former Navy SEAL who was asked, what kind of person makes it into the SEALs, right? And he said, I can't tell you the kind of person that makes it into the SEALs, but I can tell you the kind of person that doesn't. He said the star college athlete who's never really been tested to the core of their being, none of those guys make it in. He said the preening leader that likes to delegate everything, none of those guys make it in. He said some of these guys that show up with huge hulking muscles covered in tattoos because they want to prove how tough they are, none of those guys make it in. He said some of the guys who make it in are skinny and scrawny. He said some of the guys who make it in, you'll see them shivering out of fear. He said, but when they're emotionally exhausted, when they're physically exhausted, when they have absolutely nothing left to give, somehow, some way, they're able to dig down deep inside themselves to help the guy next to them. In other words, the highest performing teams of the planet are not the strongest or the smartest. The highest performing teams of the planet are the ones who care the most and are willing to sacrifice for the people next to them.
That's, I love that. And that care and community, that's a lot of our core values. They're two of our core values, two of the C's. So can we roll back just a minute and go back to Infinite Game just for a second? Because I hear you talking about one of the principles in that.
Yeah.
Building a trusting team.
Yeah.
And that is so important in real estate. It's not one person that does anything. Every successful person in this room has an army of people working with them. It looks like a lender. It looks like a title company. It looks like their broker.
Sure.
So talk about building that trusting team.
I'll give you an example. Well, first of all, what is a trusting team, right?
Yeah.
We all know that trust is important, but what is it really? So I'll give you an example. It's sort of one of my favorite examples of what a trusting team looks like. A bunch of years ago, I was in Vegas for a business trip, and they were very nice to put me up down the street at the Four Seasons. It's a beautiful hotel. The Four Seasons over here happens to have a coffee bar in the lobby. And so one afternoon, I went and bought myself a cup of coffee. And the barista working that day, named Noah, he was charming and funny and engaging, and I stood there for far too long talking to Noah. And as is my nature, I asked Noah, do you like your job? Without skipping a beat, Noah said, I love my job. Now, in my line of work, that's significant. Like is rational, right? Mm-hmm. I like the people, I like the work, I get paid well, I like my job. Love is emotional, it's a higher order connection. Like, do you love your wife? I like her a lot, right? It's different.
Right.
And Noah said, I love my job. So for me, I was like, oh, that's a higher order connection. This kid's emotionally connected to his job. So immediately I followed up and said, can you tell me specifically what the Four Seasons is doing that you would even say to me, I love my job? And again, he didn't skip a beat. He said, yeah, throughout the day, managers will walk past me and ask me how I'm doing, ask me if there's anything that I need to do my job better. Not just my manager, any manager. And then he said, I also work at another hotel. He says, and there the managers catch us when we're doing things wrong. He says, there the managers put pressure on us simply to make our numbers and perform. There I like to keep my head below the radar and just get through the day and collect my paycheck. Only at the Four Seasons, he said, do I feel, there's that word again, do I feel I can be myself? What I find so profound about that story is this is the exact same human being in two different companies, in two different leadership environments, and our experience of him will be profoundly different, not because of the person, but because of the place he works. Right? It's not the person very often. And so, when we talk about, oh, you can't get good people these days, I'm like, it's like the only common factor in all my failed relationships is, right? It's like if there's no good people ever that you can hire, I'm thinking, there's one common factor in all those people who are leaving you.
That might be you.
And Noah's experiences, we have this twisted thoughts about how we get the most out of our people. Like, how am I going to get the most out of our mate? People are not a towel that you wring them out, how much you can get out of them. The question is, what kind of environment can I create in which my people can work at their natural best? And a trusting team, you know you're on a trusting team. We've all felt it. You know you're on a trusting team when you can raise your hand and say, I don't understand. I don't know what I'm doing. I need more training. I'm having struggles at home. It's affecting my work. I'm scared. I need help. Without any fear of humiliation or retribution, but rather you say those things with absolute confidence that someone will rush in to support you. We also all know what it's like not to be on a trusting team, where you do not admit mistakes, you do not admit you don't know what you're doing, you never ask for help, and you spend most of your days lying, hiding, and faking.
There you go.
Which works for a short period of time, but eventually cracks become, the cracks start to grow and things start to break. Trusting teams are feeling safe to ask for help. That's what a trusting team is. And you're either on one or you're making one.
It's so interesting because, did I tell you my Tar Heels are in a national championship?
Yes, congratulations.
Well, they were just not even predicted to go to the tournament, and there's a story about them that at the beginning of December, they were terrible, and they had a big loss, and they came back to the university, and they got off the bus, and they went in the locker room, and they stayed together until 3 o'clock in the morning because they said, we have the skill. Right? We know the game, we have the skill, we're conditioned. What they didn't have was trust.
Right.
And they came out of that at 3 o'clock in the morning and they worked it out.
Yeah.
That collaborative thing of saying, and I don't even think the coach was there. I think it was just, you meatheads need to go in there and figure this out, and they did.
Yeah.
And the result has been winning since then. So what do we need to do if we form that team, if we're, clearly all of these people are in the right company, but how do we clear that? How do we build that trust, or is that a really big topic?
That's a very big topic, but it's no different than how you build trust in any kind of relationship. So you say, I've met this person that I really like. How do I build trust? Well, you don't tell them all your secrets on the first day, right? We all know that you have to be vulnerable, but there's a timing, and it's a dance, and it's giving somebody a little extra responsibility and seeing how they do. And if they screw up, instead of yelling at them, be like, all right, try again. That we treat mistakes as learning opportunities rather than, and a mistake is only when you keep repeating the same error and you haven't learned anything. Where we practice empathy. You build trust with empathy as well. So empathy in business looks like this. Here's a traditional scenario. Somebody walks, picks up the phone or walks into their office when we did that, and says, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before, and if you don't pick up your numbers in the fourth quarter, I don't know what's going to happen. Right? That's pretty normal. Here's empathy injected into that scenario. Hey, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. Are you okay? I'm worried about you. What's going on?
No.
Right? Where it's about the person, not the performance. And so again, it goes back to that listening, and you are not listening until somebody else feels heard. Those things, seeing someone as human, understanding that we all have stresses and strains and egos and insecurities, and we bring all of that to work. And though we still have to be emotionally professional, you can't sit in the meeting like this because you're having a bad day. That's emotionally unprofessional. Though we still have to be emotionally professional, we're still human beings.
Yeah.
And a good leader recognizes that. And by the way, somebody on a team recognizes that too. You don't have to be a position of authority to be a good leader. Because those who may be higher in rank than us are also filled with insecurity and fear and stress and strain and ego and all that. Right? And it's okay to go up the chain of command and say, hey, are you okay? You were really hard on us in that meeting today. Instead of labeling them an asshole, be like, are you okay? And by the way, and that's the dance. It's like any relationship. It's not expected for one person in an interpersonal relationship to do all the listening. It's a dance, and it goes backwards and forwards. And you meet empathy with empathy, and you meet listening with listening, and you meet difficult conversations with difficult conversations.
See, I think that's been such a lesson for us in COVID with people working remotely, is that hearing is one of the 5 senses, but listening is an art, where you really have to look at body language, and you have to figure out what's going on that's more than what is right here.
Right, which we missed out on COVID.
Yeah.
Like somebody's sitting there, and like they're talking and they're bouncing their leg like this because they're nervous. You miss that on that on Zoom.
Yeah, because
you get nothing. Yeah.
So can we talk about one other thing, rivalry?
Yeah. So of the 5 practices of the infinite game, or an infinite mindset, having a worthy rival is the easiest one to implement immediately. So in a competition, in a finite game, baseball, football, you have competitors to be beaten, right? But in an infinite game, they come, go, they do whatever they want. You don't have competitors because you're not even playing by the same rules, but you do have rivals. And some of those rivals are worthy of comparison. And a worthy rival is someone who does probably similar things as you, who does one or many things better than you. In fact, their name might make you angry, right? The mere utterance of somebody goes, oh, she's the best, and you're thinking not that. And you're smiling, but that's not what you're thinking. That's probably someone who's your worthy rival, because their strengths are making you insecure. Their strengths are revealing to you your weaknesses. And that's what a worthy rival does. A worthy rival, their strengths reveal to you your weaknesses. And you don't have to like them, but you do have to respect them and thank them. Because the goal is not to beat them, the goal is to improve yourself. The only true competitor in the infinite game is yourself.
Yeah. And see, where that is so tough for our industry is cooperation, right? And what I mean by that is I may be competing against you for a listing, but I win the listing, I might need you to sell the house. So we're competing, but there's got to be that cooperation along with it.
And a finite mindset is everything is about this transaction, this listing. An infinite mindset is I may win or lose this game, I may win or lose this transaction, and there'll be another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. And the goal is not to win this one. The goal is to be better and better and better and better and better. And what happens is you win more often. So I
see, and where I struggle with that, honestly, is I want to crush it every time.
Yeah, of course. You're a highly competitive A-type personality. I get it. But if that's all you do, you're not going to be in the game for very long.
I know. I've been in it a long time.
But this is my point. In the infinite game, the infinite mindset is about having the strength, the will and the resources. Which means will is I really still enjoy this industry. And the resources is I got the money to stay in the game. If you run out of will or you run out of resources, you find a different line of work, right? The goal is not to win every game. The goal is to stay in the game as long as possible. And you're more likely to stay in the game as long as possible if you're enjoying it and if you're making money. So, like I said, think of those agents who are better than you, whether they're better marketers or better salesperson, or they get more recommendations. And again, you don't have to like them, but you have to thank them and study them. And learn what they're doing, as I said, because their strengths are revealing to you your weaknesses. And sometimes partner with them because you're actually stronger together. But hating them is stupid.
Right.
All it does is make you focus on them rather than focus on yourself. All it does is make you focus and sit around with your friends and be like, but they don't do this, and well, you're not doing any of that either. You know? So it puts all your focus in all the wrong places. It's like, you know what it's like, if any skiers out there, if you ski through trees, every skier knows this. If you say, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree, you hit a tree because all you're doing is looking at trees. Where when you're skiing through trees and you say, follow the path, follow the path, follow the path, you don't hit a tree because you're only looking at the path. So your mindset is if all you're doing is focusing on them, then you're hitting trees is what you're doing. You're focusing on all the things that make you weak rather than focusing on all the things that make you better.
So focus on the positive, right?